Comfort on your bike can sometimes be an elusive thing. You can go out there and buy all the fanciest and most expensive kit, but it might not always alleviate it. It's got a lot to do with how you set your bike up as well as the products you use. So let's take a look at how to max the comfort of your bike. A proper bike fit is something that our friends on road bikes are much more likely to do. It's actually quite a common thing to go to a proper bike shop where they've got the setup and get a proper bike fit. Then you know all your numbers for when you want to go and buy a bike, which is great for people that like to sit on a bike in one position for a long time, so it could suit marathon cross-country races as well. Personally, I've never had a bike fit, but just with years of experience, I know what size and geo numbers I'm looking for when it comes to getting a new bike. So particularly reach for me, I'm 5'10". I know that something around 460mm reach is about right. Obviously you can tweak your bike a lot. Getting the correct saddle height is really important, but also changing things like stem lengths and bar widths. I sort of know all my numbers because I've ridden a bike for so long that I know they're comfortable for me. There's a few different types of hand and arm pain that you can get from riding your bike, and probably the most common one is arm pump, or to use a technical term, chronic exertional compartment syndrome. But there's also ulnar nerve palsy and carpal tunnel syndrome. Arm pump is being caused by too much blood coming down into the muscles. There's an inflexible membrane around the muscles called the fascia. So whilst the muscles can expand with the blood, that fascia can't. So that's where the sort of pressure and tension comes from. And this is common on really long, rough downhills, or motocross riders get it. Particularly, I get it bad on a motocross bike. Don't necessarily get it actually that bad on a mountain bike, but it can be really hard to ride through if you can't grip your bike properly. Cyclist palsy is caused by sort of extended pressure on that ulnar nerve, and it just gets compressed, and it can cause sort of tingling in your hands or numbness around your little finger. I've definitely had that as well. More on long rides, really long rides, when I'm riding my bike for sort of 12 hours, something like that, on a cross-country bike, you can get a weird sensation in your hand. Carpal tunnel syndrome, probably the more well-known of these things that can sort of give you some pain, I guess because it's caused by many other things than just riding your bike. But this can be caused by overextending your wrist for long periods of time or not moving your hands enough. I think there are some things you can do to your riding technique to help with any of these three things. It's kind of hard for me to comment on arm pump, because like I said, I don't really remember ever getting it on a mountain bike, but particularly I do get it a lot on a motocross bike. And for me, really, it was just repetition of riding. If I rode a lot, I wouldn't get arm pump. If I didn't ride for 3 weeks and jumped on a bike, I would get it instantly. So within half a lap, I would be pumped to max. But what I would find is learning to ride, gripping the bike with my legs would really help with that. It doesn't really work on a mountain bike. But I do have friends of mine from racing downhill that would get arm pump quite bad. And they tend to be the riders that are quite dynamic on the bike, really moving the bike with their arms. But that is quite a difficult one to change, I suppose. But something I would look at is grips on your bike. So luckily we're partnered with Ergon, which is a brand that the sort of name gives it away. They look at how to make their bikes, or our bikes, more comfortable by looking at contact points. So we spoke to Janina at Ergon to look at some grip advice.
Hand and wrist injuries in cycling is, I guess, what everybody already experienced. It's numb and tingling hands and fingers, sore and overused finger joints and wrists, blisters, if you want to call that an overuse injury, and for sure, arm pump. The numb and tingling hands and fingers are coming through nerve compression of either the ulnar nerve, that's in the outer area of the hand, the hypothena area, and either due to a lot of pressure of the handlebar and the grip, or due to a lot of vibration, this area can be stressed. Also, if you adduct your wrist too much or just do any other strange bendings, it might be that this area gets stressed. The outer nerve, the ulnar nerve, is innervating the ring finger, the pinky finger and the ring finger. And the medial nerve is innervating the thumb, the index finger and the middle finger. So if you feel any issues in the outer part of the hand, the little finger and the ring finger, it might be the ulnar nerve. And for the other fingers, it might be the medial nerve.
There's loads of different variables with grips, no matter which brand you choose, but the one I always look for is diameter. So I like to run the thinnest diameter grips I can. Ergon grips tend to come in the small medium and the medium large. So I'm sort of average size hands. I think they're a glove size 8, but medium. And yeah, I do prefer the thinner diameter. I feel like I've got just I like that contact to be nice and narrow on my hands, and I don't find any discomfort with that anyway. I do have fairly rough hands because I do try and ride my bike quite a lot, so I've got some nice built-up calluses.
Normally, a rider with a smaller hand tends to use a grip in our size slim or regular, because with a smaller hand, you would need to open the hand really wide if you're using a really fat grip. And this will lead to the fact that the forearm muscles are not working in their biomechanical optimum way. And the other way around, if a rider with a really big hand is using a really thin grip, he needs to close his hand pretty much. And that's why also, again, his forearm muscles are not working in their proper biomechanical area or field. And that's why muscle fatigue will set in earlier, and after it, all the comfort on the bike will not be the same as if you're using a grip which has your perfect diameter.
Of course, grips, bar and stem all work together, but don't forget suspension. So good suspension setup is going to give you more comfort, can take away arm pump, definitely. If you're riding a fully rigid bike, you're just going to get more vibrations, more chattering through the bars, so it's likely to give you more problems. But you know, bigger bikes, bigger suspension, you're not going to get as much vibrations, and good setup, of course, as well. Brake lever angle as well. For me, I've got an old wrist injury, a scaphoid. That's a common one with cyclists, mountain bikers, should I say. I find if I run my brake levers sort of too high up, too level, that will cause me issues, cause me pain on that scaphoid. Whereas too low, I feel like I have too much weight on my wrists, and that causes me problems. So, not too much one way or the other, but it does depend on your personal sort of circumstance. So if you've broken your wrists, then you'd like to have more problems than someone that hasn't.
I would start with a bigger picture. So the grip has to be perceived as a part of a bigger system. And this system is consisting of the tire, the front suspension, the cockpit, and all of those determine the comfort in the rider's hands and arms. When talking about the tire, the casing, the compound, and also the pressure the rider is riding is determining the comfort a lot. And also if the rider is using tubes or if he's riding tubeless. When talking about the front suspension, for sure, spring rate, rebound, and compression set damping are the things we talk about. And for the handlebar, the material and the material stiffness play a big part.
But also there's different sort of shapes for grips. You can definitely change the sort of the shape and the contour of that grip depending on what type of riding you do. You often see people, the marathon cross-country riders, or the people that spend a lot of time on their bike, having those grips with the sort of bigger wings on them, shall I say. So you've got a bit more contact point, whereas you go to the other end and scale, downhill riders tend to have the thinner grips, maybe the harder compounds as well. But there are loads of different variables there.
We design our grips for specific positions on the handlebar, meaning that our grips, because they are anatomically shaped and or have specific texture zones, they need to match the hand. So we have a neutral position that we recommend people to start with, and then set up the grip individually by its range marked on the grip's clamp. So that the grip's position is perfectly set up to match your hand on your position on the bike. Some of our grips are being tapered because we try to get the best out of two worlds. The inner part is a bit thinner. That's made for keeping the contact, for keeping the good direct feeling in between your thumb, your index finger and your middle finger. And the outer half of the grip is getting bigger. This means that the outer part has a bit more damping because the sensitive ulnar nerve area is in that field, is in that area, and that's why a tapered grip brings you some more comfort for the hand.
Don't forget that when we're talking about contours as well, the handlebar sort of bend and sweep can make a massive difference. Especially I find on the outside of my hand, depending on if that sweep of the bar is maybe a little bit too straight, I find a bit too much pressure in there. Probably the most talked about thing when it comes to comfort on your bike is a saddle, and this can be really personal, of course. Everyone's got different rear ends, I think. And it doesn't take long to become uncomfortable. Of course, you can look at longer rides where you're doing massive, crazy rides, and that is going to be really important. A good padded short chamois and a good saddle. But I think if you've got the wrong saddle, it can take half an hour and you'll be really feeling it. So it's trying to find, again, the right size. Nowadays, you find a lot of brands offer different size and shape saddles, and it's trying to find the one that fits you the best.
Common saddle injuries are numbness in the whole sitting area and especially in the genital area, discomfort, just general discomfort, pressure points on the sit bone and the pubic bone, shaving and other skin problems, and also issues with the lower back. The numbness is coming from a nerve entrapment of the pudendal nerve, who's innervating the whole sitting and whole genital and perineal area. And yeah, that's important to be sure and to make sure that this area is not loaded too much where this nerve is running.
I think it's also worth noting that a saddle that one of your friends swears by, or you see that's really popular on a forum, still might not suit you. So different shapes will definitely be for different people.
To get rid of these injuries, our design is focused on distributing the pressure on the bony structures in order to relieve pressure of the soft tissue area, of the nerves and of the blood vessels. Therefore, we have different shapes that accord to the rider's riding style and his sitting position, because the way the rider is the way the rider sits on the saddle, if he's bent forward a lot or if he's more upright, the whole anatomy of the pelvis is also rotated forward or backward. And that's why the contact area is changing. And that's why it's important to choose a saddle that matches your sitting position. Apart from that, we have different widths depending on the sit-bone width that the rider should choose. And we have also different shapes and different pressure relief zones according to gender, because the male and the female pelvis anatomy is differing a lot, and therefore you need to have a specific shape. Also, it's worth mentioning that I think different saddles for different riding categories, that's not quite the right word, but you know what I mean, different styles of riding definitely makes sense. So on a downhill bike, you often see people saddle sort of nose up, which is not comfortable if you're sat down for a long time, but downhill riders stand up a lot, and if they do sit down, you want to get off the back of the bike quickly. Or something like a cross-country bike, you need, of course they go for light saddles, but also you need something that you're going to be sat down on a long time, it's got to be comfy, so things do change between different riding categories. For instance, if you're riding only like one time every 2 weeks and only for like 30 minutes or 60 minutes, you can choose a saddle that is a bit softer because this will create more comfort on the bony structures. But if you're if you're riding on a regular basis and doing frequent rides and also longer tours, you should grab a saddle that is a bit harder, so that again the bony structures are loaded and the soft tissue area is unloaded. So the way you sit on your saddle and the type of riding you do and the choice of saddle basically is going to determine how comfy you are. So there's your bony structures and there's your muscles and fat. So making sure that all sits in the right place. Again, Ergon do 2 different sizes of saddle. I run the small medium. Find it suits me really well. I have my saddle pretty much completely level as well for trail bikes. Slightly nose up, like I say on my downhill bike, everything else completely flat. I just find it super comfortable. I always ride in a chamois as well. But again, it's a bit like grips. You don't always find that just a big soft saddle will be the comfiest. Saddle height is really important as well. If you have it too high, your hip's going to rock either side and that can become really uncomfortable. Too low, you're probably more likely to get problems with your knees. I would say, you know, many roadies do like to have an exact number. They'll know their saddle height. I think it's from the BB to the top of the saddle. Personally, I don't do that. I find that it depends on, you know, all sorts of different things, the size of the chamois I'm riding, so I don't always ride the same thing. Different shoes, different stack heights of pedals, all those sort of things. What I find is I probably run my saddle slightly lower than you might see other riders, to be fair. I'm not fully extended or not fully extended, but you know, people like to have just a very slight bend in their knee when they're at the bottom of the pedal stroke. I like to have actually a slightly larger one of those. I just find, for me,
It's powerful enough and it's super comfortable.
If you sit on the saddle and you simply feel that you have too much pressure in the front, but you feel that you're sitting stable on the saddle, I would recommend to slightly tilt the nose of the saddle down just a little bit. Go there step by step, take mini steps, because every half of a degree has a big impact on that. Sometimes it's exactly the other way around. If you have too much pressure in the front, but if you take a good look at it, and you might also feel that you're sitting unstable on the saddle and have too much pressure on the hands, it might also help if you lift up the saddle nose really a tiny bit again.
Comfort on a bike is definitely a really complex thing. It can be so many different things. Even the wrong set of tyres or tyre pressure could give you problems here or there. So it can be a hard one to work out. I hope I've given you some answers in this video. I know I haven't really answered how to stop arm pump, because personally, you know, I don't get on a mountain bike. But anyway, thanks to Janina at Ergon. Some of the stuff Ergon have done have been brilliant. The way that people look into the smallest of details for setting bikes up now is really important now, and can make a big difference as well. And I think if you're on the end of the scale where you're riding a lot of miles, spending a lot of time on a bike, then a bike fit could definitely help. Personally, I think I'm kind of the other end of the scale, where I'm more riding downhill, enduro, that style of riding. I don't think a bike fit will help that much. I think probably more likely to help you is actually to go to a skills coach. So someone can look at your riding, look at your bike setup, and they might be able to give you some good answers on how to get more comfortable on your bike. Thumbs up if you love riding bikes as much as I do. And yeah, let us know down in the comments below if there's anything you're really struggling with, if it's your lower back or arms. Give us some specific questions and we'll try and help you out.